Megan Thompson had always envisioned herself as a mother. After years of fertility treatments and a painful divorce, her dreams of having a biological child had faded, but her desire to nurture and love a child had not. Determined to adopt, Megan spent countless hours researching orphanages and adoption agencies. She wanted to find the right place, a place that resonated with her. One day, while browsing through online forums, Megan stumbled upon a post about an old secluded orphanage called Greenwood Manor. The post spoke of the orphanage's charm and how it provided a haven for children in need. Intrigued, Megan decided to visit the orphanage the following weekend. As she drove up the winding, tree-lined road leading to Greenwood Manor, Megan felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The orphanage stood at the end of the road, a grand yet eerie Victorian mansion with ivy creeping up its stone walls. Despite its dilapidated state, there was something enchanting about it. Megan parked her car and approached the large wooden doors. They creaked open to reveal Ms. Caldwell, the headmistress. She was an elderly woman with a stern demeanor, sharp features, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through Megan. Ms. Caldwell greeted her curtly and led her inside. The interior of the orphanage was dimly lit, with high ceilings and antique furniture. The air was filled with a musty scent, and Megan couldn't shake off the feeling that the place had many secrets. As they walked through the halls, Megan saw several children playing quietly, their eyes flickering with curiosity as they watched her. Ms. Caldwell introduced Megan to a few of the children, but none of them seemed to connect with her. Just as Megan was starting to feel disheartened, she noticed a boy sitting alone in the corner of the room, drawing intently. He had dark, intense eyes and a quiet demeanor that stood out among the other children. Ms. Caldwell noticed Megan's interest and introduced the boy as Daniel. Daniel was 7 years old and had been at the orphanage for as long as Ms. Caldwell could remember. His parents had died in a tragic accident, leaving him traumatized and withdrawn. Despite his reserved nature, Megan felt an inexplicable connection to him. She knelt down to speak with him, and though he barely responded, Megan felt a strong urge to protect and care for him. Ms. Caldwell assured Megan that Daniel was a good boy, albeit shy and introverted. Megan decided then and there that she would adopt him. The adoption process was swift, and soon Daniel was officially her son. As they drove away from Greenwood Manor, Megan glanced at Daniel, who stared out the window with a blank expression. She hoped that with time and love, she could help him heal and open up. Back at her home, Megan prepared a room for Daniel, filling it with toys, books, and everything a child could need. She tried to make him feel welcome and safe, but Daniel remained distant. He spent most of his time alone, drawing strange symbols and staring into space. At night, he was plagued by violent nightmares, waking up screaming and thrashing around. Megan's attempts to comfort him were met with cold indifference. Despite these challenges, Megan was determined to be patient and supportive. She believed that Daniel's behavior was a result of his traumatic past and that he would eventually come around. However, as weeks turned into months, Daniel's behavior grew increasingly unsettling. He began talking to himself in hushed tones and exhibiting violent tendencies, breaking his toys and occasionally lashing out at other children at school. Megan sought advice from teachers, therapists, and even Ms. Caldwell, but no one could provide a clear explanation for Daniel's behavior. Her attempts to connect with him emotionally were met with resistance, and she started to feel a growing sense of dread. Little did she know, the true horror was yet to come, and her decision to adopt Daniel would lead her down a path of unimaginable darkness. Megan Thompson's hope for a smooth transition into motherhood faded as Daniel's strange behavior escalated. The once distant and quiet child now displayed bouts of anger and inexplicable fear. He continued drawing the same strange symbols over and over again, filling sketchbooks with intricate designs that seemed to make no sense. Megan was at her wit's end. She couldn't comprehend why Daniel was acting this way, and her initial determination to be patient and supportive began to wane. One evening, while tucking Daniel into bed, Megan noticed a peculiar scar on his wrist. It was a circular mark, almost like a brand, surrounded by faint, faded lines that looked like old burns. When she gently asked him about it, Daniel pulled his hand away and curled up under his blankets, his body trembling. Megan decided to dig deeper into Daniel's past, starting with the orphanage records. The next day, she called Greenwood Manor and requested to speak with Ms. Caldwell. After a brief and awkward conversation, Ms. Caldwell reluctantly agreed to meet with Megan. She drove back to the orphanage, her mind racing with questions. Upon arrival, Megan was once again struck by the eerie atmosphere of Greenwood Manor. Ms. Caldwell greeted her with the same stern demeanor and led her to her office. The room was filled with old books and dusty files, a testament to the orphanage's long history. Megan inquired about Daniel's past, hoping to uncover any clues that might explain his behavior. Ms. Caldwell was evasive at first, but after some persistence she revealed that Daniel's parents had been involved in a tragic accident under mysterious circumstances. There were no living relatives, and the details of the accident were sketchy at best. Ms. Caldwell claimed that Daniel had been deeply traumatized and that the orphanage had done its best to care for him. Unsatisfied with the vague answers, Megan decided to look through the orphanage's old records herself. She pored over dusty files, searching for any mention of Daniel's family or the symbols he obsessively drew. Hours passed, and just as she was about to give up, she stumbled upon an old, leather-bound journal hidden at the back of a drawer. The journal belonged to a former headmistress, dated decades ago. As Megan flipped through the pages, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. The journal entries described a dark history of Greenwood Manor, mentioning an occult group that had once operated within the orphanage. The headmistress had discovered that some children were used in rituals marked with symbols that matched the ones Daniel drew. These rituals were believed to bring power and immortality to the cult's leader. Shaken by the revelations, Megan continued reading, learning that the cult had been disbanded after a series of tragic events, including the death of the cult leader. The orphanage had since tried to bury its dark past, but the remnants of those horrific practices seemed to linger. Determined to protect Daniel, Megan decided to confront Ms. Caldwell. She demanded to know if the current staff was aware of the orphanage's history and whether Daniel's behavior was somehow connected to these past events. Ms. Caldwell's icy facade cracked for a moment, revealing a glimmer of fear. She admitted that some staff members believed the orphanage was still haunted by its dark past, and that Daniel might be more deeply affected than anyone realized. Megan left Greenwood Manor with a heavy heart, feeling more confused and scared than ever. She knew she had to do something to help Daniel, but she also feared what uncovering the full truth might entail. Back at home, Daniel's behavior grew even more erratic. He spoke in a strange language while asleep, and the violent outbursts became more frequent. Megan's nights were plagued with worry and fear. She began to have nightmares about the orphanage and the cult rituals, waking up drenched in sweat. The connection between Daniel and the orphanage's dark past seemed undeniable, and Megan realized she was in way over her head. The more she tried to understand, the deeper she found herself entangled in a web of terror. She was determined to find a way to save her son, but the sinister forces at play were beyond her comprehension. As Daniel's behavior grew increasingly volatile, Megan knew she couldn't handle the situation alone. She sought help from various child psychologists, but none could provide a clear explanation for Daniel's actions or the symbols he incessantly drew. Desperate for answers, Megan turned to an old friend, Dr. Laura Mitchell, a historian with a deep knowledge of occult practices. Dr. Mitchell agreed to visit Megan and examine Daniel's drawings. When she saw the symbols, her face paled. She recognized them immediately as ancient runes used in dark rituals. These symbols were not just random drawings. They were part of a larger, sinister puzzle. Dr. Mitchell explained that these runes were historically used by cults to channel energy and manipulate reality, often at a great human cost. With Dr. Mitchell's help, Megan dove deeper into the orphanage's past. They spent hours in the library, sifting through old newspapers, archives, and books about occult practices. They discovered that the cult, known as the Order of Eternal Dawn, had thrived in Greenwood Manor in the early 1900s. The cult leader, a man named Jonathan Vesper, had promised his followers immortality through ritual sacrifices involving children. The more they uncovered, the more Megan's fear for Daniel grew. It became clear that the Order of Eternal Dawn hadn't been completely eradicated. Its influence lingered, perhaps even manipulating the present. The orphanage, despite its attempts to bury the past, was still haunted by the dark energy and practices of the cult. One night, as Megan was reading through the journal of the former headmistress, she stumbled upon an entry that chilled her to the bone. The headmistress had written about a prophecy made by Jonathan Vesper. He had claimed that his spirit would return to reclaim what was his, and that the children marked by the runes would be the key to his resurrection. Suddenly, Megan remembered the scar on Daniel's wrist. It was not just a mark, it was a brand, a symbol of the cult's claim on him. Panic set in as she realized that Daniel was more than just a victim of the orphanage's dark past. He was a vessel for something far more sinister. Determined to protect her son, Megan confronted Ms. Caldwell once more, demanding the truth. This time, Ms. Caldwell's icy demeanor broke entirely. She confessed that she had known about the cult's legacy, but had kept it secret to avoid scandal. She admitted that Daniel's parents were former members of the cult who had tried to escape its clutches, but had met a tragic end. Ms. Caldwell revealed that she had tried to shield Daniel from the cult's influence, but the pull of the Order of Eternal Dawn was too strong. She feared that the cult's remnants were still active, and that they saw Daniel as a means to bring back their leader. She urged Megan to leave town with Daniel and go into hiding, but Megan knew that running wasn't an option. The cult would find them, no matter where they went. Feeling trapped and terrified, Megan decided to take drastic measures. She enlisted Dr. Mitchell's help to perform a cleansing ritual, hoping to break the cult's hold on Daniel. They gathered the necessary materials and prepared for the ritual. But as the night of the cleansing approached, Daniel's behavior became increasingly erratic. He screamed in his sleep, his eyes rolling back into his head, and he spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. On the night of the ritual, Megan and Dr. Mitchell set up a protective circle in the living room. They chanted incantations and burned sacred herbs, but as the ritual progressed, the house seemed to come alive with a dark energy. Shadows moved on their own, and the air grew thick with an oppressive force. Daniel convulsed and screamed, his voice merging with another deeper voice that echoed through the room. Megan's heart broke as she watched her son suffer, but she held on, determined to save him. Just as the ritual reached its climax, a powerful force knocked them both to the ground, and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Daniel lay still in the center of the circle, unconscious but breathing. Megan rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Mitchell, shaken but unharmed, helped her carry Daniel to his bed. As Megan watched her son sleep, she knew that their battle was far from over. The cult's influence was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. She had bought them some time, but the real fight was just beginning. Megan was determined to uncover the full truth and protect her son at any cost, but she had no ideas of the horrors that still lay ahead. Despite the temporary reprieve granted by the cleansing ritual, Megan could not shake off the feeling that the danger was far from over. She spent every waking moment researching the cult and its practices, desperate to find a way to free Daniel from its clutches permanently. Dr. Mitchell, though shaken by the encounter, remained steadfast in her support, delving into ancient texts and obscure manuscripts for any clue that could help them. Meanwhile, Daniel's behavior continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly withdrawn, his eyes hollow and distant, as if he were not entirely present. At night, Megan would hear him mumbling in his sleep, uttering phrases in a language she did not understand. She felt a growing sense of dread, as if the walls of their home were closing in on them. One evening, as Megan was sorting through a stack of old letters and documents from the orphanage, she came across a faded photograph. It showed a group of children standing in front of Greenwood Manor, their faces solemn and eyes hollow. In the background, she noticed a figure standing in the shadows, barely visible but unmistakably malevolent. It was Jonathan Vesper. Her heart pounded as she realized that Vesper's spirit had never truly left the orphanage. It was still there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to return. She knew that Daniel was the key to Vesper's resurrection, and that the cult would stop at nothing to bring their leader back. Determined to find answers, Megan returned to the orphanage late one night. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of grim determination, she made her way through the decaying halls of Greenwood Manor. The air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. In the basement, she discovered a hidden chamber. The walls were covered in runes and symbols, and in the center of the room stood an altar stained with dried blood. Megan's stomach churned as she realized the extent of the horrors that had taken place there. This was where the sacrifices had been made, where innocent lives had been taken in the name of immortality. As she searched the room, Megan found an old, leather-bound book hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It was Vesper's journal, filled with detailed accounts of his rituals and dark experiments. Her hands trembled as she read his final entries, which spoke of a ritual that could bring him back to life using the life force of a chosen child. As they prepared for the ritual, Daniel's condition worsened. He became violent and unresponsive, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Megan's heart ached as she watched her son slip further away, but she knew she had to be strong for him. On the night of the ritual, Megan and Dr. Mitchell set up a protective circle in the living room, just as they had before. They chanted incantations and burned sacred herbs, following the instructions from Vesper's journal. The air grew thick with tension, and the house seemed to vibrate with a dark energy. As the ritual progressed, Daniel convulsed and screamed, his voice merging with another deeper voice that echoed through the room. Shadows moved on their own, and the temperature dropped sharply. Megan felt a presence in the room, a malevolent force that seemed to be watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Just as the ritual reached its climax, a powerful force knocked them both to the ground. The room plunged into darkness, and Megan felt a cold hand grip her heart. She struggled to her feet, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of Daniel. When the lights flickered back on, Megan saw Daniel standing in the center of the circle, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He was not alone. The spirit of Jonathan Vesper loomed behind him, a dark shadow with glowing eyes. Megan's heart sank as she realized that the ritual had failed, and Vesper had taken control of her son. With a cry of desperation, Megan lunged at Vesper, hoping to break his hold on Daniel. But the spirit was too powerful. He swatted her away like a fly, his eyes glowing with malevolent glee. Megan hit the wall hard, pain radiating through her body, but she forced herself to stand, her eyes locked on her son. In that moment, Megan knew what she had to do. She reached for the knife they had used in the ritual, and with tears streaming down her face, plunged it into her own heart. The pain was excruciating, but she knew it was the only way to save Daniel. As her life ebbed away, she saw the light in Daniel's eyes fade, and Vesper's spirit scream in rage. With her last breath, Megan whispered a final incantation, severing the connection between Daniel and the cult. The room was filled with a blinding light, and then everything went dark. When Dr. Mitchell awoke, she found Daniel lying unconscious on the floor, his eyes closed but his breathing steady. Megan's lifeless body lay nearby, a look of peace on her face. Dr. Mitchell knew that Megan had made the ultimate sacrifice to save her son, and her heart broke for the brave woman who had given everything for the love of her child. The police arrived soon after, responding to the frantic calls from neighbors who had heard the commotion. They found Dr. Mitchell cradling Daniel, her face streaked with tears. The house was filled with the remnants of the ritual, a testament to the battle that had taken place there. In the days that followed, the town was in shock. The truth about the orphanage and the cult slowly came to light, and the community mourned the loss of Megan, a woman who had fought bravely against the darkness. Daniel was placed in protective custody, his future uncertain but free from the cult's influence. Dr. Mitchell, devastated by the loss of her friend, vowed to protect Daniel and ensure that he grew up knowing the sacrifice his mother had made for him. She dedicated herself to uncovering the remaining members of the cult, determined to put an end to their dark practices once and for all. Megan's sacrifice was not in vain. She had saved her son and exposed the horrors of the cult, ensuring that their dark legacy would not claim any more innocent lives. But the memory of that night and the pain of her loss would linger in the hearts of those who knew her, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most innocent of facades.